think we both know, James, if you sign with a payments provider, that's one big step. But if you don't
Yeah.
actually process payments,
Right.
it's not successful and nobody's making money. So I'm trying to bridge that gap and help accelerate this time to revenue production for all parties.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Merchant Sales Podcast. Today, I have a cold, which is why I sound about 3 octaves lower than usual. But I'm really excited today to be interviewing Ali Mast. Ali is a fantastic consultant servicing what we in our industry call ISVs, these vertical software companies. We're going to talk a little bit about that today and just talk about kind of the challenges that software companies face in selling payments. So I think a lot of the information we share today might surprise you, give you a little bit of an insight, kind of behind the scenes look at what software companies are experiencing in terms of payments as as the payments world and the software world start to come closer together. I've been making a lot more friends and connections in that world and trying to understand it. And so I think this is just a really great interview to shine some light on that. We have some other great follow-up segments. Rich Norton gives us some sales tips from the field. And then, of course, we always have Patti Murphy on with the Insiders Report. And today, just talking about a lot of different kind of changes and frictions going on in the payments ecosystem, and some stats that she found that I think are very interesting. So with all that being said, this event is sponsored by this podcast episode is sponsored by Netevia. Head over to netevia.com to check that out. Neither Ali or her advisory firm are consulting clients of mine or sponsors or anything like that. It's just a great episode with an industry expert. So let's dive in. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Ali Mast, the founder of Parachute Advisory, right? Did I get that right, Ali?
You got it. You got it.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Ali, thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about how to help ISVs sell payments, right? I think is a one way to put it, but these challenges that ISVs, these software companies face, and just embracing payments and then being able to actually sell payment processing to their merchants. And so we got a lot of really cool questions around that. But before we dive in, Ali, we'd love to hear your story. How did you end up in this crazy industry? And tell us a little bit about, what you're doing today.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, James, and thanks for asking. I have had quite an interesting journey here, probably a little different from many of the excellent payment pros you've had on your podcast.
Mhm.
I actually started in a different world. I started in SaaS, and I spent a little over 15 years growing and scaling SaaS companies as a revenue leader. And during that journey, I explored and executed a ton of different distribution strategies, including vertical sales, which kind of ended in entrenching myself in B2B payments with a focus on issuing.
Mhm.
In about 4 years, I popped over to the acquiring side of payments to kind of round it out.
Right.
And I started working for a SaaS company as well, but they focused on providing tools for enabling payment facilitators. So it was a platform for underwriting, boarding, risk monitoring, merchant management, funding, all of the things that you need to do as a PayFac. And as a part of our growth there, I worked with so many payments companies, processors, sponsor banks, but specifically spent a ton of time with vertical software companies, helping on their journey to evaluate if they wanted to become a PayFac or not, and how to then go deploy payments based on what they decided as a strategy. And as the market progressed, I took part at that company in our expansion to become a payments provider ourselves. And so we offered our tools in another way, which is often called PayFac as a service or managed PayFac, if you will.
Right.
And this kind of gave me a cool opportunity. I got to sit on both sides of the table. I had been the vertical ISV, I'd been the software company embedding payments, not knowing what to do and not knowing how to navigate. And then I got to be the payments company, selling to the
Right.
ISVs and helping them with the struggle of how to go do this well and strategically.
Mm.
And it gave me a great deal of insight into the gaps in knowledge and understanding on both of these sides, almost like it was two worlds, two completely different languages. And so it was kind of this discovery that inspired me to start Parachute Advisory and help the founders like me or the payments novices like me as I started navigate and successfully monetize payments.
Right.
Because I think we both know, James, if you sign with a payments provider, that's one big step. But if you don't
Yeah.
actually process payments,
Right.
it's not successful and nobody's making money. So I'm trying to bridge that gap and help accelerate this time to revenue production for all parties.
I love this, Ali, and I think it goes back to something I've been thinking a lot about lately. As I talk to ISVs, I'm always interested in, the kind of the definition of success in a payment integration, right? It
Mhm.
seems like for a long time it was like, do you offer payments? And if the
Right.
answer is yes, yay, you're successful. It's like, well, but wait a minute, like what percentage of your merchants actually are using the payments that you're monetizing? It's like, oh, 3%, 8%, 12%. And to
Right.
me, that's not a successful payments implementation. Obviously it is a challenge getting integrated. We'll talk about that a little bit, but at the end of the day, you got to actually be selling payments through your software company if you want to make any money on it. So let's
Right.
let's zoom out a minute here, Ali, and help us kind of define something. So we keep talking about these terms ISV and things like that. What are these companies, and more importantly, like what do they call themselves? Because I don't think they actually even would know this term. So talk a little about the terminology and like what is the definition of these companies that are monetizing payments that we're talking about?
It's it's so funny you ask because I feel like this is such a good example of the aforementioned multiple languages and the need for
Right,
translation. An ISV is one of so many payments acronyms that are really tough to decipher when you're not from the payment space. It's actually one thing I spend a ton of time on is this like glossary of payments terms and
right.
payments 101 training. You probably do a lot of this as
Yep.
well. But ISV is short for independent software vendor. But what this truly means is a vertical or industry focused SaaS company. And what's so interesting to your point is we work with so many innovative payments companies who are really sharp. They have a great market, great presence, great volume, and they're building these strategies to meet the needs of ISVs, yet their target market doesn't even know what they're called. So,
Right.
it's kind of about like figuring out how each side translates that and how do you bring value to the ISVs while they can understand what you're saying to them and translate that then to their customer market so that everybody can deploy payments successfully.
Yeah, I love it. I think a couple things maybe it'd be great for people to understand. It would be again, ISVs don't know that they're ISVs. It's a vertical specific software company, right?
Mhm.
They don't know what a Schedule A means. That's another really
Right.
common term. They have no idea what that means at
Mhm.
all. Generally don't have a lot of understanding in terms of payments margin and kind of how that's created, right?
Yep.
Even companies that have spent a small fortune to complete an integration and whatnot, still these terms are lost on them a little bit. So Ali, you get with one of these companies, they've already got maybe a payments integration and that part
Mhm.
of it's there. What do you focus on? What are the problems that you're generally trying to look for and solve when you have an engagement with a software company these days?
Sure, sure. And James, you're so right. Many of these terms are completely misunderstood and possibly used differently in different
Right.
areas of payments. Even just the concept of a gateway or a sponsor bank or a referral partnership versus an ISO. I hear the term ISO interchanged with ISV all the time.
Hmm.
And it's just because they're so similar in nature, but they're not the same thing.
Right.
So there's a variety of stages in which I engage with a software company, and some of them could be brand new, but to your point, many of them have taken one step, and maybe they've gone with some plug and play like Stripe out of the box, or maybe they've started with a really great step like a referral partner. But they need to figure out, or they've proven their market concept, and they need to figure out how to take on a little more, maybe make a little more margin and bring the experience in house or insource it.
Right.
And regardless of stage or what the first step they may have taken was, there's some really common challenges in understanding that I help with all the time. So, one is just which model is right? Like, what do I do now? What do I do next now that I've proven this market? Is it okay? What is my risk appetite? Is it okay to do underwriting myself? Or how much of this do I have an appetite to outsource to the right partner?
Right.
And sometimes understanding that is harder than you'd imagine because the questions you and I might ask, they don't always know the answers to. So, getting those answers is something I work very intimately with them on and making sure they understand the meaning behind them. And then properly building the business case for what their next step is. And this is very payments 101y as well. Just get that business case in place.
Right.
And it's not uncommon that I do this more often with VCs and PEs to look at their current and future portfolio companies to invest in as well.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the second theme I'd say is like, how the heck do I commercialize this? We know SaaS, we know recurring revenue.
Right.
Do I make it a requirement to use me for payments? Do I pass through costs? And then that has a whole another set of ramifications and requirements. And it's very overwhelming. So I help them with the basics of like, how do I go sell this stuff? right? And
Right.
how do I make it meaningful to my customer base? And SaaS companies also often don't understand the selling strategy of payments. So I help build the infrastructure, and I don't love the term playbooks, but really the sales enablement and the how to speak about this to your merchants.
Right.
And a lot of times that includes how to read a merchant statement and where you have hidden fees and how to navigate all of these different things that are not relative to your software.
Yeah.
I like to equate it to it's no different than a software company rolling out a brand new product that has completely different competitors, completely different incumbents, completely different value props, different pricing. Of course, your sales team needs enablement and support to get there.
Right.
And oftentimes, they might not even be the right sales team for it. You may need subject matter experts, or you may want to use partners where you can outsource certain components of sales. And that's a lot of what I do when I get
Mm.
engaged, a lot of the common themes,
Yeah.
regardless of stage.
Isn't it interesting, Ali, the different roles that these organizations will play? It's so complicated because there's so many different kind of, Lego pieces or building blocks, right? As far as the, in terms of what analogy you want to use, but it's like, do I take on risk? Do I do underwriting? Do I sell it even, right? As you mentioned
Right.
a second ago, do I
Yeah.
outsource that? And then we have all these kind of building blocks of, okay, well then whatever I choose to take on, well, I have to make sure I have the right people in place to do this, and I have to
Mhm.
execute. And meanwhile, there's all these different payments companies that will kind of do everything or nothing, depending on what you
Right.
want. So there's just like this blank slate. And I think for a lot of the software companies out there, they get into the payment space and they're like, well, how does this work? And everyone kind of says, how do you want it to work?
Mhm.
And they're like, I don't know. What do you mean? I don't know anything about this.
Right.
And they just, and then, and I think and I think, Ali, and I just thought of this now. It's like, isn't it interesting? I think the answer to that question a lot of times with the software companies is, I want to make as much as possible,
Yep.
right? So they're like, oh, well, then you want to be a PayFac or you want to be a wholesale ISO. You want to do
Mhm.
everything. And
Yep.
then they kind of get into that and they go, oh, well, but I'm actually not making anything because,
Right.
really, I'm not even selling it. So I think it's so interesting, right? And I'm sure you probably spent a lot of time on these kind of like really
Mhm.
complicated questions of which puzzle pieces do we put together and in what order, because you don't have to take on everything day one. You can do it over time, right?
Yeah. And the cost of the in-house burden, whether it's employees or
Yep.
tech support, whatever it might be in that situation, or even just managing the risk and underwriting, right?
Right.
Might not be worth the benefits and margin depending on the size of the company.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is a lot about understanding, well, what are their goals? Were they
Yeah.
mandated by their VC to say, hey, we want you to take on payments, which is great. And I'm so glad that the investment community understands this because probably
Mhm.
not even 4 or 5 years ago, it was much less understood than it is now how
Right.
valuable monetization of payments is. But is that the only reason they're doing it? Are they looking to have a higher valuation? Are they looking for customer stickiness? Or are they losing customers to their competitors and they have churn that they want to reduce? Like, what are the motivations? Is it
Right.
pure revenue or are there other reasons? And I
Mm.
think that really helps like understanding the core motivation behind it to align them with the model and then the partners.
I love it. Before we go on to the next question, there's two terms you've used a couple times that I want to clarify for everybody on this one that they may not know, right? Which is VC and PE. So talk about what are those, just real quick. What are those, and then also maybe, when you're working with a software company that's VC backed versus owned by private equity, what are kind of the differences there from in terms of where they might be at in their payments journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up because I'm going with my acronyms in my SaaS mind, and I need to translate them as well. So, VC is the venture community, and they often invest in software companies. VC-backed software companies tend to be earlier stage. So think seed money or Series A, even Series B, and more sophisticated later stage growth companies are often working with PEs or private equity or growth equity firms, which are both a little different and bring a lot of the concept of their own value to the table. So both VCs and PEs are investing in these vertical software companies to help bring them to the next level. And oftentimes it's really appealing for both of them that the company has an additional revenue stream opportunity, whether or not they've started it or not.
Right.
And so in my experience in the VC community, you're seeing a lot of those first steps. Like I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, Stripe or referral partnerships. And the VCs are saying, well, how can we help accelerate your attach rate or the overall take rate that you're making on this? And
Right.
that's a part of the value they bring. And the same thing with PEs and growth equity firms. They're looking at what the attach rates are. And maybe this is a little more sophisticated of a payments model. Maybe they've brought some of this in-house. Maybe they're even working to be a full payment facilitator at this point, but they don't have success in attach rates in their customer base, which is super common. You mentioned like single or double digit attach rates earlier. It's
Right.
it's not great. Like ideally, even the average SaaS company that has 50% attach rate isn't what we want. We'd love to see it higher than that.
Right.
But hopefully that helps on the VC and PE
Yeah, it
topic.
does. Yeah, what I found is I feel like the VCs a lot of times it's about kind of validating assumptions for valuation purposes. So it's kind of
Mhm.
like make sure you're making it easy. So they certainly they want to make money, but it's almost like they want to prove this software company can sell payments and get a decent attach rate. It's almost more proving the assumption, right?
Yeah.
When you get into the PE side, it's normally like now we're trying to print money. So now it's like the margin is really
Mhm.
starts to get really important. And it's like, what are the financial trade-offs? And the
Yeah.
PE firms also bring so much additional infrastructure to the software companies in terms of financial controls and operations and experience that they can all of a sudden say, well, hey, we could take on some of this stuff and we can help you walk you through that, you know? So I think it's a little more, a little more of that side of it, right? Trying to understand the operational piece. Okay. So how, and this is such a broad question, but how do software companies think about payments today, and how has that perception in your mind, how has that changed, right, over the last few years?
Yeah. I It's been an interesting dynamic to sit back and watch. I'm sure you've experienced the same. Software companies are just educated now, right?
Yep.
5 years ago, payments was kind of a new concept,
Right.
right? And then these newer software companies, or even those that have been around the block, they're growing up in this time of following early market leaders like Toast and Shopify and Service Titan and seeing what percentage of their revenue can be obtained from payments and using them as a roadmap to say, well, we want to do this. And I think early on, even kind of 3, 4 years ago, you mentioned earlier this whole I want to become a payment facilitator trend was very
Right.
hot. You saw sponsor banks going out there building their sponsorship programs to approve payment facilitators,
Yep.
and all of these software companies looking for, well, how do I bring risk in house, and how do I get my policies and procedures done, and how do I go to market with this? And I think things have shifted a little bit. We've seen that slow down a bit because what I see is this 2.0 of payments companies, this new kind of trend of payments companies coming out where they offer a lot of this, much like ISOs,
Mm.
and you can do it with a 2.0 company without taking all of the risk or carrying all of the overhead. And the margins aren't that far off. So
Right.
not only are there different options that have trended over time, I'm actually seeing payment facilitators that got registered 4 to 6 years ago unwind
Yep.
and go back to models that are a little less risky and a little less costly in-house because it's worth it to reduce the overhead and it doesn't impact their margins very much.
Right.
And
Right.
I'd say what's kind of cool and probably relevant to your listeners is the ISO space is rapidly needing to accommodate some of these needs as well. Right? It's becoming this competitive market with vertical SaaS and ISOs and
Right.
who does what. And some are just doing a fantastic job keeping up. I was looking at Solero the other day as
Mm.
an example.
Yeah.
They have this really core and successful business supporting direct merchants, financial institutions, and that doesn't go away. But they took the signs of the market and they've adopted their own managed PayFac or PayFac as a service offering just to tackle the ISV channel. But
Right.
it's this holistic offering. So I love to see all of the payments companies out there just slowly adapting to the needs, which have really shifted quite a bit in the past 4 to 5 years. And then add the element of what we just spoke about, the investor community
Right.
supporting, trying to prove the concept, and then trying to increase the viability of it. It's a much different market than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah, it seems like there's so much more pressure now when I talk to software company executives, right? There's this, payments before was almost a risk for them in a lot of ways because it was like, well, this isn't something that my VC or my PE firm director told me to do. I'm just taking initiative. Now it's reversed. There's all this pressure of like, how much are you making on payments? Well, not very much. Well, that's a failure. You got to figure this out, right? Um, so as they go down this journey, so they get their integration done and whatever it is that they're going to do with their payment model. And then as we've discussed and kind of alluded to a few times, they have this challenge, right? They're very good at selling software. So they're selling, 100 new merchants a month on software, and they're selling 15 of them on payments, let's say, or
Mhm.
or 30 or 40. Why is that? What are the challenges that they're facing that's like keeping these software companies from attaching payments to their software sales?
Well, one, I think the market is so competitive, right? And so that there's options out there, which makes it challenging. And two, it's really the knowledge of how to position this. And so, as I mentioned earlier, just navigating how to tell a merchant that your rates aren't exactly what you thought that they were, and we're going to give you a better experience. It's embedded in our tool, it's the seamless user experience. And oh, by the way, it's bundled with your SaaS solution, or we do it at this beneficial rate for you, or you get all of these other optionalities like ACH and other embedded finance opportunities within our solution. So it's just this very complex sale that is not a SaaS sale. And so you have to understand that payments language. And I think, one great way that ISOs and agents have done this is they've stayed really scrappy. They know how important it is to activate an account. They know how important it is to get that volume growing and to focus on the success and the customer success journey. And both selling but also supporting their merchants is really challenging for SaaS companies. So that's
Mm.
really a part of what I do. I mean, we have unbelievable leadership and talent in the founders of the largest SaaS companies out there, CEOs, CROs, and beyond.
Right,
And of course, they have the capacity to sell.
right,
It's just the expertise in bridging the gap to accelerate time to that revenue and attach rate. And that's where kind of I come in. The other thing I'd say, James, is the way that we position payments as SaaS companies has to be a little different than everybody else positioning payments directly to our merchants.
sure,
So there's a little bit in differentiation of message that has to be nuanced based on the industry as well.
right,
If you're selling into retail or restaurant, there's really low margins and you got to work on something else, some bigger value, right? It's not going to
right,
be a price-based play. But you have healthcare and field services and all of these other diversified industries that are somewhat newer in theory to payments. And so their margins are still
right.
pretty healthy. And so how you sell to those, it's very industry specific.
Mm. I think one thing that's going to be really interesting, Ali, in the future is kind of watching these software companies. Right now it's like they're trying to figure out two different things, right? They have SaaS and then they have payments, right? Very different. Um, and we've experienced this with CC Storage, the ISV that I own, where we've caught a lot of our competitors very flat-footed, and we're gaining a lot of market share because we don't look at it that way. Our model is there's this one thing that's a new client, and payments is part of that. And so we look at the whole picture, and it's like, well, what's our pricing model that's going to work? What should we charge for the software, understanding that they're going to do payments? Well, if
Hmm.
you do, in our case, dual pricing, which is compliant for our
Sure.
vertical, we don't charge you anything for the software, right?
Yep.
And our competitors are like, what do you how do you make any money? What do you mean? It's like they just don't get it yet that, well, wait a minute, no, our margin per account is higher than theirs, right?
Right.
But we're
Right.
doing it differently. And so I think a lot of the software companies, it's like there's these different layers. It's kind of like just get integrated, make it an option. Then it was like
Mm.
understand payments. They're getting there. And I think eventually it's like, oh, okay, we got it. We understand payments and we understand the macro kind of effect on the merchant account, and then how do we put these pieces together? And I think there's going to be a lot of really unique business models that we're going to
Mhm.
see around payments margin it's going to be like this extra lever that we can pull to grab market share from our competitors. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm seeing some of the smaller players in industries that have been somewhat monopolized by larger players. Field services was a great example I just brought up.
Right.
So you have ServiceNow, right? You have WorkWave, you have all of these really strong companies that were leaders in payments early on
Hmm.
that have met the needs of those industries. But there's new software companies coming out that are really interesting in the way they're approaching it, and that they understood that, James.
Right.
They're not going just to sell software. They're going to give you tools with everything that you need embedded in it and give them to you for free if you
Right.
process your credit cards through them, or
Yep.
if you process your ACH even through them. So
Right.
it'll be interesting to see how those kind of roll up in the coming years. I can
Yeah.
imagine there'll be some consolidation over time, but
Right.
definitely an interesting trend.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is I think we'll also see a lot of the roll up of other services you just mentioned, right? Like, what about rolling up the idea of maybe accounting at some point? It's an API driven custom accounting for this vertical, or
Right.
insurance, or payroll services, or whatever. Like, I think there's just going to be all these different services, banking. It's all going to become very kind of verticalized, and then at some point the actual software is almost like, well, we'll give you that, like, just please sign up for our software so that we can sell you on the 17 other services that we provide that add margin.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's that next sticky trend, right? Is
Right.
that, I mean, the huge embedded finance market, I think most
Mhm.
recently I read it's $585 billion market, so across both embedded
Right.
payments with acceptance and payouts, but as you mentioned,
Right.
lending, insurance, payroll, banking as a service, issuing, all of it. That's where they differentiate, and yes, that is a
Mm.
huge commercial opportunity that I think will be prevail in the coming years.
Okay, so I got two more questions for you real quick. First one is, I know we've already kind of gone over this, but I would really love to hear just two or three specific things that
Mhm.
tips that you would tell for the software companies that are listening right now. What are the two or three things that you would tell them? Here are the quick tips or tools to help you sell more payments as a software company.
Yeah, so I have a guide I like to start with, and it really breaks down all of the pertinent details behind the payments program and drives the way that I engage. Uh, and one of the things I think that is so commonly misunderstood is conversion plans for legacy payments providers. So you're not always just selling to a merchant that doesn't have payments processing. Most of them do,
Right.
and they have contracts in place, and you might have to work towards details of their contracts, which are dates or exclusivity or non-solicits, right? And there's all of these intricacies in the space that aren't just if you have a legacy payments provider, it's also with your merchant's legacy payments providers. So I think having a really strong conversion plan and understanding how to price those a little differently, how to accommodate their timing, how to support them, the process and infrastructure internally, and of course, then how to forecast differently to the board and to your teams, how to hold your sales teams accountable for the right expectation. It's not just,
Mm.
I have X amount of customers and they process Y amount of payments, and therefore in 12 months I can attain this. There is so much more that goes into a, a formula that makes sense like that. And that's where I work very closely with my clients to just help
Yeah.
get some realistic numbers and then properly incentivize their sales team, whether that's internal or whether they've outsourced through some great agents or ISO networks as well.
Love it. Okay, so that's the tips for the software companies. Now let's move over to the ISOs and agents. So, what are some things that that we maybe haven't covered yet? Are there any other things that come to your mind that they should understand about software companies that maybe they don't understand today, or many of them might not?
Yeah, I mean, helping them translate is equally as important. I think one of the best lessons for ISOs to understand is that perception that they're competing with their own market in vertical SaaS and trying to remove some of that. So, getting really
Mm.
creative with offerings. There's, as you know, endless processing partners to work with. And so, you have to differentiate. And what experience can you provide? And how do you add value to that SaaS companies in a target market? Is there an opportunity to creatively let them participate in the revenue share to make the economics more appealing for them, or leverage your large network of agents to drive business back to them, not just to go sell payments, but can those agents then drive business back to the software company to get their core business built on the SaaS platform? And in turn, that brings more payments opportunity, right? So
Right.
how do you find that niche way to either work in one specific industry or vertical, because that is really helpful to have a specialty in those.
Right.
But also, I think it's important to remember ISVs are not the only channel. I know it's a very exciting, kind of like sexy new channel, and everybody wants to sell into ISVs. It's not a company strategy for ISOs. Like, it should be one of many strategies.
Mm,
So diversification is so important because the competitive market in ISV is very competitive. And the
right.
last thing we want to do is overly drive our rates down, which arguably is already happening. So I think it's just
Right.
the focus on differentiation, the vertical, and making sure that you're driving value to them in a way that others can't.
Mm. I love it. This has been so insightful, Ali. We'll definitely have to have you back on. We have so many other things as we're going through the podcast. I'm coming up with all these other questions that I want to ask, but we're going to run out of time if we do that. So, I would love though for you to share for those who maybe want to get in contact, maybe they have an ISV that they'd like to connect you with, or there's a software company listening in right now. Where would you send them to learn more about you and your company?
Absolutely. Well, I stay very active on LinkedIn, so you can find my company page, which is under Parachute Advisory, and then my personal page connected as well. But alternatively, feel free to just drop me a note, an email at Ali, it's ALI at parachuteadvisory.com, or jump onto my website, which is parachuteadvisory.com. So we keep it simple.
Awesome. Ali, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really appreciate it and hope you have a great day.
Thanks for having me, James. It was a pleasure.
Hey everybody, back here with an announcement from a good friend of Vlad Sadovsky. How you doing this week, Vlad?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Awesome. So, last week we were talking about the satellite offices and how you're really trying to give that, focused experience to different agents based on their needs. And I was thinking about all the challenges that W-2 agents in this industry have faced. I know many of them listen to this podcast. They have kind of unique needs and wants as far as the programs. So tell us a little bit about Netevia Platinum, which I believe you created kind of to fill that void and to really give them kind of the experience they're looking for.
It's definitely one of the focuses, right? And it's run by the team that previously worked for Heartland Beyond, all these W-2 sales forces that have been out there for years. I believe that honestly, W-2 sales force of Heartland for years been probably one of the most organized sales forces in the country. They were severely underpaid as times went by. It was Revolution program 20 plus years ago, but Bob Carr is no longer around, and there's definitely significant changes that took place that within the organization, and the global is really trying to figure it out what they're looking to do with that program. Um, and I thought that it was a great timing for us to enter the space, and we wanted to make it a separate business. We wanted to make it a separate focus. Um, yes, everybody's doing payments, but at the end of the day, it's people dealing with people.
Right.
And I don't possess the W-2 mentality. In my 30-year career, never had it. But we
Right.
found some people that do. They do a great job, phenomenal year for them. As a matter of fact, we quietly started the project just about a year ago. And we are about to enter into brand new phase for that project where we really wanted to be nationwide. And banking is a cornerstone of that business. W-2 banker is a cool
Yeah,
concept.
absolutely.
I started on a whim. I did not expect it. I started on a whim, and it's growing really well.
Right.
And that program combined with the experience and knowledge of people that come from Heartland, come from beyond Clearant, that has that organizational skill, but want to get a fair shake in today's market compensation strategy is what this Netevia Platinum team is all about. Of course, Netevia Platinum has the traditional 1099 plan. We don't want to leave anybody behind, but it's specifically geared towards the agents,
Right.
and having an opportunity for the agent that maybe was shy to try to do on his own, maybe was a W-2 sales force somewhere else, and to get a little bit of freedom, but at the same time provide the security of the medical benefits, and that concept combined with absolutely updated compensation plan compared to Heartland and beyond plus banking and plus additional POS services that, let's face it, Toast's been eating Heartland for lunch because Heartland's restaurant business was forte of their business for decades,
Right.
for a long time. And so there was nothing for the Heartland rep to really do and to really sell. With us, they can sell Clover, they can sell other POS systems that we're going to be talking about, I guess, later on. And there's more coming in 2025. But the
Right.
main focus is it's a huge Salesforce channel.
Sure.
We thought that banking plus processing plus organization of that channel really fits our goals.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wish for anybody better than Gus and his team to head up that project.
Love it. So for those that want to learn more about this, we actually set up a new link. It's netevia.com/CC Sales Pro. So if you want to learn more about the things that Vlad and I are discussing in these announcements, we'll have a variety of things there. We'll have the professional card that we talked about for a while, but we'll also have these different satellite offices. So if you want to learn more about that, just head over to netevia.com/CC Sales Pro and check it out. So back here with my good friend, Rich Norton today, talking about how to sell payment processing. How you doing today, Rich?
Doing excellent. Great to be on the call with you.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about kind of the differences in the industry with different programs and pricing and all that. And today I want to talk about, you get out in the field, you're prospecting and selling, and then you do run across that merchant and they bring up something. Wow, they need inventory, or they want some kind of feature where you realize we're going to need to put something in here. Maybe it's a Clover, maybe it's some other point of sale solution. And a lot of agents, they kind of get a little nervous about that. Oh, I thought I had a simple sale and now it's getting complicated. How do you handle that? How does it change the sales process, and kind of how do you deal with that kind of difference there?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I've been in the industry, as you know, 24, almost 25 years. And when I first came into the industry, it was one credit card machine, the Nurit 2085 Plus. And one day it's going to do smart cards, and that was it.
All
That's
right.
what we sold. Now, and I fight the battle too, because I'm tech challenged and I'm learning as we go. And it goes to show you, no matter how long you've been in the business, we're going to learn also. So don't
Right.
be afraid to say that you don't know, things, because people will respect that. And I had a prime example today. I had a merchant that they completely different. They had some technology that involved software, and we had to do some integrations. And I wasn't fully sure if we were going to be compatible with that. And the way I handled that, I said, look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I know we can help you out. I'm 99% sure, but I want to make sure that I'm 100% sure. So I'm going to make a quick call. I got another merchant to go help out real quick, and I'll come back in probably about an hour. Does that sound fair enough? So I got on the phone with integration departments. This merchant has this, they have this. Can we integrate? Yes, we can. All right. 3 different ways we can do it, 3 different gateways. So I looked at the different ones. I said, good, I know that one. I'm coming back. And I got back there in an hour. I said, I got good news. We can integrate. We have 3 different ways of integrating, but I've already chosen what I feel in my experience is the best solution for you. Now, all I'm going to need to get it going today, because I know you said you wanted to get it going, is a check. You're right, void. We're going to fill out all the information and get everything going for you. So that's just a prime example right there. And it's okay, because I know we have a lot of new representatives that are on the call. And you walk into a business, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I present? I've got all
Right.
these things in my mind. Keep it simple to begin with. Focus on the traditional and the terminals and the reward pay, the consumer choice and the surcharging program. But when it gets a little bit more complicated, this is why I cannot stress enough to make sure you're on a team. That's someone that's going to teach you this, that you
Right.
can keep learning this. And that's why with our team, we've got Monday Zoom calls. Our Payrock has calls, introducing the new products and everything. And we can talk more about, like, when you walk into a merchant, for example, and they say, hey, we're a restaurant. We got this old Verifone right here. We'd like to get something with a inventory. We'd like to put our
Right.
menu.
Menus and right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to learn that. And I'm telling you, I'm going to say probably 50% of the businesses that I'm writing up right now, I'm using Clover Minis, I'm using Clover Duos, and I'm presenting the program Consumer Choice with the app,
Yeah.
showing them that all restaurants are doing this right now, but it has to be done in a compliant way. And what
Right.
we've done is we're allowing restaurants to completely eliminate all their processing fees. Like, for example, in a month, you said you're doing about 30,000 a month, and you're paying about 900 to Square or wherever you might be using. Well, we're allowing merchants to eliminate that, and you're seeing all the restaurants doing this by having a menu which includes the price for credit, and then essentially they're getting a discount for paying cash. So they have a credit regular price basically, and they have a cash discount program. And then when you just explain that, they're like, okay, I've heard about that. How does that work? Then you get into your presentation. So I think it's good to give a little preview of that up front and then find out if that's going to be the best solution for them.
Love it. So, Rich, for those agents who are listening in, they're like, yeah, I'm struggling with that. I'm trying to figure out how to make this transition as technology evolves, and they maybe want to reach out to you or learn more about your team. Where would you send them?
Yeah, reach out to me at 904-434-4635. We have one of our executive team members. His name's Brian Ehrlich, and this guy's a guru with all the real complicated stuff.
Right.
And what he does is, like, for representatives, we say, look, just reach out to him. He'll work out a program with you, and you can just pass it off, and you can just keep on writing merchants, and you'll get money off of that. So we've got all types of leaders, and we've got teams that are teaching every phase of the business. You can't learn it all at once, but you want to make money out of the gates and build upon that. But you can also reach out to me through the email, Payrock Rich Norton, Payroc, Rich Norton @gmail.com. Tons of people are calling us. Call us. We'll see if you're a good fit for our team.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rich. Have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
So, James, this week I want to report on a new report from the website Payments titled The Orchestrated Platform, Why Payments Orchestration is Not Just for Merchants.
All right.
I thought that, payments orchestration isn't something we've really talked about, but we've kind of talked around it a lot.
Right. Sure.
So, it refers to the process of managing and optimizing multiple payment methods and gateways, in a seamless, integrated manner. And it allows businesses to route transactions to the most suitable payment processor based on factors like cost, transaction type, geographic location, and customer preferences.
Right.
So research that Payments just published, actually just came out the other day, reveals how demand for diverse payment options, as demand increases, payments orchestration is becoming essential for platforms, and particularly in the evolving e-commerce landscape. Platforms face increasing pressure to accommodate a growing variety of payment methods for potentially thousands of merchants, each with their own payment services provider. And so marketplaces and other platforms often find themselves in the same position as merchants, scrambling to offer all the payment options customers demand. And that, of course, renders payment orchestration all the more important.
Right.
So the report had a couple interesting statistics I found interesting. For example, it projects that local payment methods are expected to represent 58% of global e-commerce transactions by 2028, up from 47% last year.
Wow.
This shift is largely being driven, not surprisingly, by account-to-account payments, also known as pay-by-bank or bank-to-bank payments, which we've talked about here.
Yep. And
those are projected to account for 18% of all e-commerce transaction volumes by 2028, up from 8% in 2023. But here's the really most telling statistic, at least one that jumped out at me. 77% of consumers that were surveyed by Payments and this company Spreedly, payments orchestration platform that kind of sponsored the research, 77% of consumers said they would abandon their shopping carts if their desired payment options were not available.
Yeah.
Now, I know you and I have talked about that in the past, having the payment option, but that's a really high percentage.
It's very high, and it honestly, it surprises me a little, but not that. I mean, if it was people like me, it'd be 100%.
Right, exactly. But people like me, I'm not as, I think it's a generational thing.
Sure.
But it seems to be cutting across generations if that statistic is legitimate.
Right.
So payments orchestration, of course, enhances platforms' competitiveness by facilitating quick onboarding and access to diverse payment options. As platforms navigate complex currencies and payment methods, orchestration allows them to enter new markets confidently while delivering a seamless experience for merchants and consumers, the
Yep.
report states. All of which leads me to believe we're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just I love all the kind of futuristic and thinking through like how things are going to evolve. I do think there's still, we're living in such a age of kind of convenience around payments, but also there is still a lot of friction left that's going to be eliminated.
It's amazingly a lot of friction, and I think that we probably see more of it here in the U.S. than in other markets,
Right.
because we're so large and
Right.
so diverse.
Yep. Absolutely. Wow. Well, good stuff, Patty. Thanks for sharing that with us today.